Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the February edition of the Staff Wellness and Health Booster Sessions. Our topic today is preventing burnout by completing the stress cycle. This will be the first of three presentations on this topic. My name is Chad Saxon, Communications Specialist with Shared Health, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Our presenter today is Carmel Watson, Organizational Assistant Specialist with Blue Cross Manitoba. We'll get to Carmel in a few seconds, but we have a few housekeeping items to go over first. As we all know, this has been a time of great change in our world, and we have been forced to adjust how we conduct ourselves in the workplace, our homes, and also with our social connections. These changes can sometimes feel overwhelming. To support the mental health and wellness of health system workers and the public, Mental Health and Addictions Shared Health has brought together skilled trainers from across the province to facilitate several booster sessions. As I mentioned, in today's session, we will discuss the stress cycle. As we know, everyone experiences stress at one time or another. It might be something as simple as a looming deadline or as emotional as the death of a loved one that triggers your stress levels. No matter what the cause is, many people who deal with a stressful situation will go through the stress response cycle. While there's no one way to manage stress, completing this natural sequence of events can help you cope with your situation healthily and prevent burnout. During this three-part series, we'll explore the several research-based ways to help complete the stress cycle and manage your body's response to a tense situation. As I mentioned, our presenter today is Carmel Watson. Carmel has over 20 years of clinical experience while working in the nonprofit, health, and government sectors. She is experienced in providing individual, group, and family therapy, as well as crisis intervention. Carmel is also a well-established presenter of mental health and well-being topics and is skilled at consulting with senior leaders in the development of solutions to support the wellness goals of many organizations. She completed her Master's of Marriage and Family Therapy at the University of Winnipeg and is a member of the Canadian Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. Following today's presentation, we'll have a few minutes for questions. Also, we remind everybody that today's presentation is being recorded and will be made available as a streaming video on Shared Health's Mental Health Resources page. And with that, I will turn things over to Carmel.
Thank you so much. And obviously, I don't need to do an introduction. Thank you for sharing that. Good afternoon, everybody. And yeah, welcome to the presentation on preventing burnout by completing our stress cycle. As mentioned, today is part one of a three-part series. So I believe that we'll be meeting here again next Tuesday and the following Tuesday. As mentioned, I work for Manitoba Blue Cross in a position called Organizational Assistant Specialist. And also, as shared, I've spent the last 20 years or so working in a variety of different workplaces, including nonprofit organizations. I did have a private practice for a period of time. I shifted into working within healthcare, as well as most recently within the federal government. Most of the work that I've done, however, was working as a therapist in clinical settings, and more recently it was with the federal government to work with leaders of organizations to promote well-being and wellness, mental health wellness for everyone. And so I'm really excited to present to you on the topic of burnout, specifically because in healthcare, it's a real thing, and we're seeing more and more people express feelings of burnout. I will say this is only my second time presenting for Shared Health, so I'm not overly familiar with the specific platform, and I was a little stressed right before as we were trying to figure out sharing and all these different things. So I hope this goes smoothly. I can't see any of you, so I am presenting to a screen here, which feels a little bit strange when I can't see everyone. So I'm hoping everything works out today, and there will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions. So there is one video that I was going to share that may not be able to play, so I will make sure to send a link out to that. Let's get going here. Okay, so here's the agenda for this is for the overall session. So part one is today. So we're going to take a closer look at what burnout is, what the signs and symptoms of burnout are, and the different components, and then maybe some tips and ways that we can respond. Part two next week, we'll discuss stress mindset theory. Now, I know that sounds a little boring when I say that. However, it's really important for us to understand the difference between stress and stressors. It's also important to know that our perception of stress affects us more than the stress itself. So it's about our mindset or how we understand stress that affects us the most. And then the week after, in part 3, we're going to discuss all the ways that we can complete the stress cycle in order to prevent burnout. So these will be very practical tips and reminders of the ways that we can move through stress. Okay, let's start by talking about what burnout is. Okay, so in the 1970s, a psychologist by the name of Freudenberger pioneered the research on burnout. And I will say that up until about 5 years ago, most of the research is on professional burnout. But more recently, we're seeing some research emerge, on parental burnout and caregiving burnout. And for some of us, we might be feeling burnout from all 3 of these areas. So burnout can be defined as a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. Burnout in the course of employment can make one feel emotionally drained, okay, and unable to function in the context of work, but also in other aspects of our life. A common question that I often hear is, what is the difference between stress and burnout, right? And how do I know if I'm stressed or if I'm burnt out? So stress will come and go. It absolutely, it's there, it's around us all the time, and it'll come and go. It's not as challenging to manage, and we can typically pinpoint it to a situation or a person. And individuals who are stressed out can still manage, they could imagine feeling better once everything is under control. So one of the first things you should know about burnout is that it can be extremely difficult to detect because it comes on subtly and it progresses gradually. So sometimes we don't even realize what's going on. We don't become burnt out after just a couple of rough days. And unlike being stressed, burnout feels like there's no hope or end to the way that we're feeling. As you can see on the slide here that I'm sharing, there are 3 main components that define burnout. A very big component is this exhaustion, okay? So burnout leaves us feeling overextended, depleted, and just plain out drained. And this usually occurs because we're overloaded with our to-do lists and priorities, and we may also be experiencing some degree of conflict within that. So feeling drained and fatigued without a means to be replenished means that individuals are barely left with enough energy to get through the day. The next one there that you see, another component of burnout, leaves all of its victims feeling inefficient and unsuccessful. So not a great feeling. So there's a real decline in feelings of competence and productivity, and at times symptoms of depression might emerge. So often things like becoming, it's really difficult to cope with, or a growing sense of inadequacy can kick in, and we start to see ourselves as failures. Like I said, not a great feeling. And lastly, if we don't catch it while we can, burnout gets us into some really murky waters where we experience this last point here, which is depersonalization with a loss of idealism. So here we see individuals flooded with negative, cynical, or excessively detached response to others and situations. So while becoming automatically detached absolutely can serve as a protective factor in order to preserve the self at times, this level of detachment usually shows a high level of distress associated with the complete and utter exhaustion we initially experienced at the onset of burnout. I do want to mention that experiencing these red flags, the things that I'm commenting on this slide, does not automatically equate to burnout, okay? Rather, they suggest a warning and a need for change. So while each component is correlated with the other two, and one often leads to another, individuals will also have very distinct burnout profiles. So for example, some people are mainly exhausted, but haven't yet developed that cynicism or begun to doubt their performance. Others are primarily cynical or suffer most from feelings of reduced efficacy. So people can also be high on 2 components and low on 1. So although most of the prevention and recovery strategies that I'm going to show coming up are designed to address all 3 of these symptoms, it is a good idea to sort of pay attention to your specific burnout profile while so that you know where you need most of the help. So, so yeah, as I'm talking, think about that for yourself or somebody that's close to you. You know, they may be high on one of these or two of these. And so you can kind of specifically pick which strategies might work better. So this is a video that I was going to share with you, and it does a really good job at explaining the signs and symptoms of burnout. I will say, and so this link will be shared with you after. Chad said that he would be able to do that with you. The reason I'm not playing it is that the audio is not working very well. So, you know, it wouldn't be a little bit frustrating if I played it and you couldn't actually hear the words. I do want to mention that I don't love the reference of, they use the term laziness or someone who is lazy. However, the reason that they do that is that a lot of people will discuss that or share that that's what they're worried about. They wonder, is this what's going on for me? And they start to beat themselves up about it. So the video kind of highlights the difference between the two, and that it's not somebody being lazy, that there's other signs and symptoms that might indicate that you're feeling burnt out. So I'm gonna have to just skip past this. Sorry, I'll go on to the next one here. Now, I wanted to share this one as well. An article that I recently read quoted, it was a study from 2019, so fairly recent. However, it didn't take into account necessarily everything that we've gone through in the last 3 years or so, but 2019. So it suggested that the following groups of people are most commonly affected by burnout. And I think probably a lot of you would connect with this. We've got teachers, nurses, doctors, social workers, elite athletes, and parents of chronically ill children. So that seems to be, in this study, what they discovered were the most commonly affected people. So let's talk about some of the things that we can do if we're feeling burnt out. The first one here is prioritize self-care. Now, I do want to say as well that I realize most of us are really tired of hearing this term self-care. You know, there's a few terms over the last few years that we're tired of, and this is one of them. But the reason that we share this is because it is really important, and it's often the first thing that falls to the side when we're feeling overwhelmed. So, you know, it's essential to replenish your physical and emotional energy along with your capacity to focus. So we want to prioritize good sleeping habits, nutrition, exercise, social connection, and practices that promote well-being. Maybe it's meditating, maybe it's journaling, or it's spending time out in nature. So if you are having trouble squeezing these activities into your packed schedule, you might want to give yourself a week or so, like take some time to assess exactly how you are spending your time. Some people like to do this on paper, or in a spreadsheet. Everybody's different. I'm a pen and paper kind of person. I like that. My partner loves spreadsheets. So, you know, or again, there's many apps out there that could help you do that. So for each block of time, I would suggest that you record what you're doing, whom you're doing it with, and how you feel. So you might even want to do a scaling question here. So you want a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 equals angry or drained and 10 is joyful or energized. So then you can determine kind of how you feel with this block of time and how valuable the activity is to you. So this will help you find opportunities to limit your exposure to tasks, people, and situations that aren't essential and that maybe put you in a negative mood, or identify the things that actually boost your mood. So you want to increase your investment in those that boost your energy and make space for some restful, positive time away from work. Again, I know we all know this, but it's a good reminder, especially back to those basics. That's the one thing that I always find go first, and yet they make the biggest difference, even down to drinking enough water. So that is part of self-care. So prioritizing the things that we know make a difference for us. So while that rest, relaxation, and replenishment can ease exhaustion, it can also curb your cynicism and enhance your efficacy. They don't fully address the root causes of burnout. So back at work, you know, you may still face the same impossible workload, the conflicts that you're experiencing, or which is very common again in healthcare, the lack of resources. So this is where we might need to shift our perspective. Okay, we'll want to take a closer look at our mindset and our assumptions. A good question to ask is, what aspects of your situation are truly fixed and which can you change? So what's within your control? Okay, so altering your perspective can buffer the negative impact of even the inflexible aspects. So if exhaustion is a key problem, you might want to ask yourself, which tasks, including critical ones, could you delegate to free up meaningful time and energy for other important work? If cynicism is a major issue, can you shield yourself from parts of the organization that frustrate you while re-engaging in your specific role? Or could you build some positive, supportive relationships to counteract the ones that drain you? So it doesn't mean that we ignore the big picture. However, when we shift our perspective and we focus on what we can do, it can provide us with the space to take care of ourselves, focus on the places where we can create change, and find the energy to have that bigger fight when the time is right. So it is about figuring out what we have control over, what we don't, how we can best use our time and our energy. So making that shift can make a little bit of a difference. The next one here is to reduce your exposure to stressors. So this includes both at work and in your personal life, and often involves resetting the expectations of whether it's your colleagues, clients, or even family members for what and how much you're willing to take on. So it might sound a little silly, but it's often a good idea to discuss like ground rules or expectations with these people as you move forward. So yeah, like I said, it might sound a little bit silly, but it's really, really important. And you might get some pushback from people, but then you can remind them that you're making these changes to improve your long-term productivity and protect your health. And so this is where setting boundaries is super important. Some of us are better at that than others, but this is a really great place if you really want to reduce that exposure to stressors, to start looking at those boundaries, looking at ways that that you can do things differently. Okay. And now this last point in this first part here that we're talking about today is burnout. The last point I want to share, and the best antidote to burnout, is seeking out rich interpersonal interactions and continual personal and professional development. Okay, so you might want to find coaches and mentors who can help you identify and activate positive relationships and learning opportunities. I added this one on here, but I want to just make a note on this. So often, if you volunteer to advise or support others, can feel really good. However, I wanted to say, please only do this if you've created the space to do this, or maybe you're swapping out something else that has been draining you, because we most definitely aren't saying to add more, right? So when I say, hey, volunteer to be a coach or support others, that could at times feel like, okay, it's just one more thing I have to do. So please make sure that you're only doing that if you have the space to do that. However, it could also shift things for you, right? This can be an effective way of breaking out of a negative cycle and doing something that perhaps feels really good, and makes you feel good about your work, and again, shifts things. Another great one about these connections is that you find some like-minded people, again, whether that's at work or in your personal life, to connect with. Often if we can band together or offer that sort of mutual support back and forth, we can identify problems and brainstorm and advocate for solutions. So this will allow you to feel like it'll increase that sense of control and connection, which can make a really big difference in regards to our recovery or even our prevention. So again, first part today was really to identify what is burnout. Please do watch that video. It'll give you some ideas on what the signs and symptoms are. Tap into some of these different pieces to help you work through some of those different components that I shared around burnout. There are some, sorry, I just want to share here, lots of additional resources here that you could take a look at if you're interested in reading more. There are, of course, lots of different videos as well. So this book is really good. There's some videos there. There's a website. There's even a podcast here that I'm sharing. So check those out. And that's the first part, is learning about burnout. Like I said, the next one, we're going to learn a little bit about stress and the stress theory. And then at the end, we will talk about how completing that cycle in order for both prevention, and supports along the way. So very quick presentation today to start things off. Any questions? I'll let Chad sort of, I can't see the chat or questions come in, so I'll let you let me know if there's some questions or comments out there.
Hi, none at the moment, but I would encourage anyone who does have questions to enter them into the question section. Also, I'll mention that if you take a look in the chat area, that's where you can find a link to the video that Carmel referenced earlier. So that link can be found in there. So it gives you an opportunity to go look, and we'll also try to make sure we have that online with the video as well.
Oh, perfect.
So initially, like I said, no questions at the moment. A couple just that kind of came to mind for myself when you were doing your presentation. You talked about the idea of trying to set boundaries and avoid some of the stressors. I'm curious, like, what do people do when they work in jobs where they're not able to do that? You know, there are certain jobs where something may be causing stress, but that might also be sort of their day-to-day function. How do you recommend people handle that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it really is about, again, taking a look at the things you have control over and the things that you don't. So, you're right. In some jobs, some of the stress and the things that are there that are causing stress, you don't have any control over. So identifying that might also allow you to be able to create some distance, and then picking some things that you do have control over and then setting the boundaries and maybe focusing on those might help shift things for you. So it might be going back to whether it's within your work, like saying, okay, what is my role? What do I do here? What do I have control over? Filling up my day to do certain things, shifting things. So maybe I could do a bit more of this because that feels good and I have some control. So some of the things we can tweak a little bit and work with, some things we can't. But just being able to acknowledge that and say, okay, I can't change that, can help us have a slight shift in how we see things and how we take things in. So if that makes sense, Chad, it is. And that's why those exercises about sitting down and putting it on paper or using an app or a spreadsheet can help us to see that a bit more. How are we spending our time? What things are we focusing on? And do we have control? Do we not have control? And where can we make those small little shifts?
Yeah, I can see we're visualizing it, like you said, like it's sort of your colleague Jody, she did a presentation, kind of name it to tame it, I think was the title. And so sort of that mentality of, if you can't name it, if you can't identify it, then how are you going to make it better?
Right. Yeah, and it feels so much bigger too if we're just angry about the overall system. Let's say if we can break things down and kind of name what are the things that are causing us to feel overwhelmed, what are the things that maybe we can work a little bit more with and have some control. You're right, and actually part of the next spoiler alert, in I think the third part, I talk about name it to tame it because that's one of my most favorite strategies. So yeah, it's a good one.
Great. Not seeing any questions at the moment, but again, if you have anything, please enter them into the question section. We have a few more minutes here left for questions. We can go right to the bottom.
There is a lot of, I do hear a lot of questions about trying to figure out the difference between burnout and stress, or burnout and depression, things like that. So definitely the video is helpful. And I will say burnout often in the past, again, has been very focused on work, right? We get burnt out from our work. Again, there's a little bit of a shift in new studies coming out around caregiving. So whether it's parenting or caregiving of other people. So we're seeing more and more that burnout is showing up in different areas. Mm-hmm. And usually with burnout, there is, we can identify that it's a cause of work or caregiving, whereas depression is a little different in that sense that it's not necessarily something that we can pinpoint. Depression can happen as a result of burnout, but burnout doesn't happen as a result of depression. So there is, there's, again, lots of information out there, lots of resources to understand the difference, but that's a big question that I often get.
Yeah, that's an interesting differentiation. We do have the one question that came in. What if you're at the point where you really need to make a change, but don't have the energy or are not in the proper headspace to attempt to make that change?
Yeah, and I think that's where that first step, like you're probably in that stage of that exhaustion, right? And it's true, right? How do I do it if I'm just too exhausted to actually do anything? So again, not everybody's favorite word, but that self-care piece, that's where you want to start. And it may actually be taking a break. So taking some time off work or getting some space from what's causing the burnout or what's a huge contributor to the burnout, to be able to breathe and take a step back, right? To be able to look at things. So that can help you see things clearer. That can help you do a little bit of that self-care, which again, basics, get some sleep, eat, drink enough water, all of those things can give you at least a little bit of energy to then see where you can make those changes. Reaching out to a therapist or a counselor, also another great idea, because they can ask certain questions or have you see things differently. So yeah, I would say exhaustion, you're right. You need to find the actual energy to make those changes first. So that's why we have that self-care as one of the number one things.
You had talked about having that conversation with maybe whether it's your family member. I would imagine having that, being able to have that conversation with also your employer, your manager is vital to making the changes that maybe you want to see in your life.
Absolutely. I mean, the hope would be that you have a good relationship with your manager, your supervisors, to be able to say, hey, like I'm starting to recognize these signs of burnout, and I know that I need to take care of myself. Like this is the first step. And hopefully there would be some support there. I know, again, it's a healthcare is very busy. Everybody's trying to find that time. So maybe it's a conversation with your manager or supervisor. Maybe it's a conversation with the entire team saying, how's everybody else doing? What can we do as a team to create this space? So there might be that option of supporting each other to be able to do that work, to take the time off or to take a step off of the unit to do that self-care piece. So yeah, it's a conversation at work. It's a conversation with your family, your friends, and getting to know for yourself what your needs are. I'll give an example. This weekend, there's Super Bowl party, right? And I am more of an introvert, and I do know that what I need to take care of myself is some downtime by myself. Being around a whole bunch of people for the Super Bowl party was not what I needed to re-energize myself or reset things. So I had to have a conversation with my partner and my friends and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to stay home. You guys have a great time. I know myself well enough to know that this is what I need. So I stayed home. They had a great time. They all had the energy to be around people. And that's great. For me, I knew what I needed. So it's setting the boundaries, the expectations, allowing people to understand that you're doing this to take care of yourself so that you are available in that bigger picture. So you're right, conversations with all of those people and setting those boundaries is very important.
Great. I don't see any other questions at the moment. I was just going to mention, obviously, you did mention already that this is the first of a three-part series. So next week, same time, Tuesday at noon, we'll be back. For anyone who hasn't had a chance to register just yet, I dropped the link into the chat section. So again, you can just click into there. Also, we do have the information on the Shared Health website. It's on the I think it's the mental health resources section as part of the under the COVID-19 section. So you can go through there, and it's also been emailed out to staff and everything. So if you haven't had an opportunity, please check the past newsletter, and so there is information on there. Again, so yeah, first of three. So we look forward to next week, and we'll be back here same time and same format. And we did have one comment, just somebody just noting thank you and very good. They enjoyed the session, so thank you for that comment. And from
I'll
there,
make sure not to put a video in next time, because that was a chunk of time that we lost this time. So now that I know that the video won't work, I won't include the video. I am going to send over, Chad, too, and I spoke about this in the last time that I presented a service that Manitoba Blue Cross has called Connect Now. It was actually created during the pandemic, but we continue to have it. And it's a great resource for anybody who does want to connect with somebody right away. Our mental health professionals that answer our phones in order to set people up for counseling, they are available for people who just want to speak right away and don't need to use one of their counseling sessions. So that's an option too, right? If you're starting to feel burnt out or you just want to kind of check in with somebody and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Any thoughts or ideas on what I can do today to try and practice that self-care or reset? Connect Now is a great resource. So I'll send that over to you, Chad, and you can also share that on whatever platform makes the most sense.
Great. No, that's awesome. Yeah, it's I've heard lots of good things about the service, so that's a good link to share. So yeah, I think we're at 12:30, so we'll close things off there. We've had yeah, good start today. Lots of comments coming in saying thank you for today's session and they appreciate the information. So again, we encourage you to join us next Tuesday. We'll be back, like I said, 12 o'clock, and yeah, hope to see everybody then. All right, thanks again. Have a good day.